part 3 of our discourse for July 15th, 2020, as we look at what can be called the android ape of the modern day and age, with a special focus on white women's supremacy, providing this information for future generations because the present cannot handle the perspective of truth. Future generations can use this information to help them evolve beyond the trappings of this world. Philip K. Dick is a very famous, well-known author of the 20th century, and many of his books involve the theme of the android human race. We see very much the science fiction prophecy of Philip K. Dick coming to light today. In the same way that cell phones are connected to a tower, and individuals using those cell phones are connected to each other through that tower, in the same way that there is a networking of humans on social media, whether they like it or not, in which their emails may even harvest the birthdays of, say, their contacts on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram, without them even knowing it, thus connecting them in ways in which humans previously were not connected. Today, with technology, merely looking at someone on the internet can have an effect, including a very dark effect, including what can be seen or perceived to be a positive effect, but as we look deeper at this supposed positive effect, are we actually seeing a spiritual connection, or are we seeing in reality a rise in dopamine as a result of the brain chemistry getting excited by being looked at in a favorable light? Things are not as they seem. So in this reality, a truth speaker has to take great caution in who they talk to. They need to realize that there may be energetic consequences for talking about certain things. The reality of the hive mind can be seen in this day and age, where merely saying someone's name, especially when two or more are speaking of a certain someone, and that certain someone becomes activated, or another way to describe it is summoned. And some people that have a certain level of ability, they may not be actually psychic, but they may have the hardware, if you will, like a cell phone, like a fancy cell phone with all the bells and whistles, that's able to connect with all different parts of the world. That doesn't mean that the information is refined. It could mean the opposite, that they are very much controlled by the hive mind, by the mainstream programming. And so we see the reality of the hive mind. One example of this is when people falsely think that they are interpreting prophecy or being given a vision. They may not realize that their connection to the hive mind is beaming signals, messages, images, even movies in full color HD. And their ego in this fallen world may tell them that those are visions from God, when in reality they're downloads from something else. And so in the modern day and age, say for example, with a YouTube channel, putting out certain types of information to an audience that really doesn't want to hear that person's truth to the best of their ability. They want to hear what they want to hear. They want to hear what gives them an orgasm. They want to hear what pumps them up, gets them ready to fight. They want to hear what makes them feel good. On a conscious level, they want to be told things of a certain nature that are already in line with what they believe. So under the guise of truth, under the guise of frequency raising, under the guise of so many things, many are swimming in darkness. And so the truth speaker may notice certain patterns, but their awareness of the true nature of human psychology may come later rather than sooner. And as a result of being naive and a slave to one's own ignorance and vanity, they may walk through life thinking that they have a deep understanding of the truth while remaining vulnerable to threatening forces. For years, these forces may be perceived as the government and things of that nature, with the people being the more righteous, trustable, dependable. And a decade may go by at least before they realize that foreign armies, foreign governments, and or their own government are not actually their greatest threats, but the members of the ape-android species. Now, when we talk about the modern human ape-androids, this is very much a Gnostic belief, and it leads one to a committed renunciation of this world. When one realizes the level of consciousness that the people are at, when one is in a situation where they have to hide themselves, when they have to relocate, when they feel they have to stop speaking their truth or filter their truth very, very carefully, more carefully than brewing one's own beer or concocting a particular cocktail or drink or meal. In reality, when one finds himself having to walk on extreme eggshells around other human beings, then that's the time to wake up. As to where the real challenges, the real oppositions, the real dangers are today in the modern world. These cell phones, these tablets, these computers have done more to program people back into the box as opposed to waking them up to ideas that are beyond their understanding. These devices have deepened the programming, brought new levels of programming, discrimination, hatred, racism, gender warfare. More of these things than we previously were experiencing in the day and age where you actually had to get a chance to know someone or a group of people before placing judgment. And so the reality of white women's supremacy comes from this hive mind consciousness and the types of interference that the naive man, perhaps a naive man of color, that which, while lost in his illusion, leaves himself vulnerable to heartbreak, attack, usually of the psychic kind, in which people observing that individual, hearing that individual's truth, project hate, project fear, project judgment, while being in total ignorance of that which they do. The modern ape-android of the modern day and age appears collectively unable to recognize patterns or count the cards, if you will. If you can imagine somebody in Vegas or a casino somewhere counting the cards. Someone with a certain level of brainwave activity, certain level of competence, certain level of intelligence. And so we live in a day and age where certain things are possible within reason. Certain things can be learned. Certain skills can be developed. But we see what we might call the litmus test, or a test of a population to see if after a few months of silence, they realize that they were told the truth, that they were given clues. And so a series of warnings may be delivered, for example, over the course of a number of years, in some cases over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. Warnings about foreign armies, warnings about certain countries, warnings to the women about their physical safety. In a day and age in which people do not help their fellow brother and sister during collapse, but rather they show their teeth. Their vampiric ways, which seems etched into the very DNA that they hold within their cells. We live now in a day and age of COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and a true lack of awareness as to how society is responding to this. We see counterfeit ways in the backwards world, the inverted world, on social media and others, that people attempt to paint themselves in a positive light. People helping people. People caring about people. Things of that nature. But what qualifies for that does not appear to hold a whole lot of weight. And so we see an increase in crime. We see an increase in trolling. We see an increase in stalking. We see people at home all day, binge watching content, thinking that they're in a collapse, but barely aware that they're being programmed for something, that they're being manipulated, that they are being programmed to be angry with their fellow brothers and sisters, people of color, or in some cases, white people. You see, somebody can become spiritually aware of how we have been divided while staying out of hate and racism themselves. But the people of this world are not at that level. Instead of evolving their consciousness, they are simply getting worse. And it's important that this be documented, but it's also sad that this cannot be shared with average mind consciousness. That for years they threw the gun, metaphorically and literally, at the feet of the people. Go ahead, pick it up, do something with it, do something. Yeah, baby, yeah. Slander somebody, hurt somebody. And websites may say that they have a terms of service where they protect privacy. And yet, consciousness is so low that the people don't realize what these websites are actually doing. In the era of reverse psychology, they may admit on a level that there's a conspiracy, that there's a deception, that something is not quite right, but they will trace it to a falsehood, a fallacy. If they're Republican, it's the Democrats' fault. If they're a Democrat, it's the Republicans' fault. So when they look at social media today in 2020, and perhaps one day we will live without these social media websites, and perhaps it will be a very, very long time, however, past the time in which we are gone from these bodies, in which those websites are no longer on the earth. But for now, they are. And there is a science of propaganda that has the people eating out of its hands. And so we have people on multiple sides, also multiple languages, multiple ethnicities that are addicted to those websites, addicted to fear, addicted to chaos, but unable to see how it is being engineered to affect everybody, to lower the consciousness, to alter the consciousness of everybody in different ways. When people are stuck in a mentality of themselves, however, being a victim of just simply other people, of a political party or an ethnicity or a country, then they are unable to be self-responsible for their own actions when they become professional victims. And often these times, in this backwards world, people that actually are victims, people that are actually discriminated against, people that are actually assaulted, there's this type of ape android hive mind that somehow makes excuses for the evil things that are done to them, based on the psychology that they have adapted to. And so the true speaker in the modern day and age is tasked with mastering certain levels of meditation. While we're not getting into the specifics of that, When we talk about clearing out the mind, that's for a specific purpose and reason. Clearing out the thoughts of others, because our minds can be invaded by these parasitic entities that for no good reason want to feed, but specifically in many ways, feed on someone's energy while watching them through certain websites, but not actually being a friend to them. Even if they enjoy the content, even if they agree with many things that are being said, many humans now are dangerous. They don't realize their own ulterior motives as they seek to make a beeline for someone's auric field, to establish a chord with someone. Chords are developed by talking to certain people, thinking about certain people. And because of the limited brain size and the limited percentage of the brain that we are using, human beings today naturally have OCD, where they obsess on people, they obsess on their desires, they obsess on their angers regarding certain people. If they're not getting the energy that they want, they are unable in many cases to see how foul they have become. When boundary crossing, right, becomes a sport. When slandering someone becomes a sport. Right? Just like those prototype personalities that attempt to infiltrate the lives of true speakers, it may take them years until they flip and they're activated by darkness to turn on that individual. So true spirituality and true spiritual growth is much more involved than what we think, and it may take us years, and it may take sobriety. In a day and age in which we love our marijuana, right? We love our pills, we love our alcohol, but it may take, in many cases, total sobriety to become aware of the blind spots that are there threatening our safety. Recently, I deleted many comments that I left on various channels that I believe contributed to the growth of bad luck. And I actually consider myself lucky. Many videos that I stand behind in which I hit the nail on the head, I've delisted in preparation for the future, a future in which we may see more of these deranged human beings walking around attempting to track people by their name for no reason whatsoever, and an increase in this type of behavior and other violent assaults during times of collapse or lockdown. So instead of people going, wow, he was right. Wow, they hit the nail on the head. Wow, I wonder what else they're saying. For no good reason whatsoever, those people will be labeled an enemy. How does he know what he knows? Is he working for the government? Is he an agent? AKA COINTELPRO, for those that don't know what that means. There will just be an assumption that someone is evil for coming close to the truth, or in some cases, describing the prototype personality. So the person that is mentally sick, that is addicted to technology, but falsely thinking that they are awake, they will hear about the prototype personality and become very, very paranoid that they are being talked about, that that person is talking just about them, when in reality, that person is talking about thousands of people, in fact, millions of people, and on a planetary level, billions of people. But instead of there being a basic level of consciousness, for there to be humble and meek and open to the truth, they become vicious. So there's something about this world of nature, the so-called natural world, that is unspiritual, that appears very machine-like, and operates in a way to oppress certain people that have the ability to unlock many, many minds and thus set the soul free. There is a purpose to me putting my heart and my soul into these recordings to leave for the next generation, because those alive today are more capable of harm, destruction, and slander than doing anything whatsoever to be of assistance. Because I have a memory, which is a character asset, not a deficit, not a defect, but an asset. Because I have a memory, I know what it was like 10 years ago to say anything that I wanted to regarding the truth, of course, motivated in helping people rise above hatred and genocide. Sometimes my words were strong. Sometimes I called out specific people. But it was okay for me to do that because there was less viciousness. And so it's like different parts of the solar cycle or eclipses or passing of planetary bodies. There are certain times in which there's a receptiveness to the truth. And then there are certain times in which people become vicious when someone's sharing their truth. And their dark programming of the ARCHONS will kick in. And they will falsely believe that someone is pure evil or serving the devil. Because, of course, of the co-opting of spiritual teachings that began a very, very long time ago. And so many of today's religions from the east to the west professionally suppress people that are different or people that are trying to access the knowledge of the Godhead and have a direct experience with that which we call God. Now, through the program of white woman supremacy, and to get into all the different examples of people that I've known and seen, would take me a very long time. And so we will only go over the most important parts. The next individual will be referred to as Subject B. Subject B, with her own channel, was watching my content for years, maybe even a decade. And of course, people will discover certain people because they may be, they may hear that person's name on another channel where someone is speaking kindly of them. Hey, such and such has some really good ideas. You might want to check them out. Or they may be old school and come across them at a time, right? Like at some sort of a nightclub and hardly anybody's there and a few people are there early. Like, hi, how are you doing? I'm Bob. Hi, I'm Sarah. Later on, the nightclub gets packed and, they're about their ways. And maybe the sweat and the steam might even, accelerate a little bit of aggression in that place of limited space. So we might see a transition over a period of hours, even some fights. Well, the world's just like that. The animalism of the nightclub. So a day may come in which someone is speaking of their emotional wounds because they're blind to the fact that the vampires are there waiting for the wounded empath. They're waiting to hunt the Gnostic as they did thousands of years ago, yet unaware that the spirit of Arianus is channeling through them, even if they see themselves as New Agers. Groups of individuals that rarely call out the archons and the true suppression of the divine feminine and masculine, those parts that are divine, that protect and heal, that are within us. They may be blind to their own wickedness, while falsely believing that they are the chosen ones or walking in the light. When speaking about how being genetically so different than most of society, and being to a certain degree disowned and ignored by both sides of the family, this person already had information that can hurt me, knowing that certain words could be used to attack me. This person wasn't attacked. However, the topic in the video related to how women use technology to control men through the cell phone, through the internet. And the point is to rise above that particular behavior, to not attempt to manipulate people through these toys of oppression. And she commented one day and said, what we really need to do is keep the Muslim women away from the white women, or rather the Muslim men, out of the lives of the white women. Like there has to be intervention, if you will, to keep these two groups apart. And it's not so much being for those groups getting together, but recognizing the humans that brought me into the earth. Knowing how rare I am as a human, and despite all the fear-mongering of the internet of a less white world or a white genocide, which is really propaganda to create fear and panic and retaliation in some cases. Actual attacks on people that are escaping countries that are being bombed back to the Stone Age by specifically the country that those sick people are in. And so this modern day conspiracy theorist / New Ager, who previously worked for a very bad individual in the counterfeit independent media, to put it lightly, had been presenting herself to be a spiritual being, right? Also with the book about the law of attraction, which often is about using the powers of the mind to get physical things for oneself, not so much what is right, and even less, right, how do we apply the powers of the mind to end the suffering of others, or to wake people up regarding certain things. Instead of them being at that understanding like an android ape that knows that they are perceived as more superior than others, they play that card. They scratch that lottery ticket. And they laugh. They cackle all the way to the bank as they credit their high frequency, aka their chosen one status, where people say one thing, but they really mean something else. And so this particular individual that created so much heartache was very quickly supported by outspoken neo-Nazis and white supremacists that had a thing for her, that never let me move on from that moment. In comment sections, engage in slandering, saying, so-and-so said this, but they didn't say that. He's lying. And for that to be hovering somewhere for a very, very long time to create conflict, to create resentment, and perhaps worse. This particular person in one video, around the time of 2011, 2012, attempting to project herself as someone capable of providing advice regarding achieving higher consciousness, but using certain words which are really codified because they mean something else. Raising your frequency. When in reality, these words, raising your frequency, awakening, shifting your consciousness, is about changing your mindset. And so in the dumbed down ape android world, these references to changing one's frequency are assumed to be positive things, wonderful things. When in reality, we see a viciousness, a cold-hearted nature come out of certain individuals that, mind you, appear that they're part of a tribe where their friends and their friends' friends and their friends' friends and their friends' friends all look the same, with the exception of an occasional token. But in some cases, there's no token to be found. But if there is, it's usually black or one of the accepted minority groups, and it is usually never members or never ethnicities of certain other people. Despite how spiritual they may be, despite how much they may have agreed with that person, the moment that person comes clean out of the closet and says, I am made of this DNA, and the hatred that leads to people being killed and put into concentration camps is despicable. The moment in which one stands up against that archonic system is the moment in which these so-called love and light individuals either abandon an individual or attack them. There's 3 different general types of personalities that we can look at with today's humans. Those that are on the hunt for the Gnostics or on the attack for the empath. And then there are those that do nothing and just watch to see if that person's going to defend themselves and fight as if this is some sort of barroom brawl and the woman's deciding whether she's going to go home with a certain man or not based on how aggressive he appears to be. The third group would be including people, a very rare number of people. In some cases, there will be none or just one. Those would be the ones that step in, intervene, and go, you need to get away from these people. These people are not your friends that you're trying to help. These people are trying to hurt you. I will help you. Whether it be get a job or relocate or something to that effect, or to be told the things that you need to hear. Whether it be about one's vanity or one's illusions or the lies that we tell ourselves. Somebody could tell themselves lies year after year after year and not realize that they have been lying to themselves because of their desire. Their desire trumps their common sense. They desire to be loved. They desire to be touched. They desire to be heard. They desire to be seen. And they may be so lost in the world of illusion that they don't realize that their desires have enslaved them as well as their fears. And so a person could be making mistakes year after year after year, sharing their fears with vampires or people that are later going to become vampires, waiting to be activated, waiting to be turned. There's this type of blind assumption that things are progressing, things are getting better as people get more and more channels, as they visit more and more websites, as they spend more hours online, as they create more content, as they make more money, as they live in more places, as they buy more homes, as they go on more trips. There is this perception of progressing somewhere in this backwards realm, yet not even realizing that they're chaining themselves to this world, not progressing forward spiritually, but find themselves in spiritual bankruptcy. So I noticed how this individual has been close to other dark individuals, more than a few, including Subject A, spoken of recently, Subject B, Subject A, both working for a particular individual that has spread many, many lies on this planet. Acting counterculture for years, only to influence their flock to getting behind a certain consensus reality. It could even be argued, right, that today's modern day social media, alternative media, has been a honey trap to suck people in early on before things became dangerous, before social media websites actually turned on people, to not only gather data, just in a general sense, bank accounts, personal details, like the Borg automatically does, artificial intelligence, corporate websites, also hacking, but for people to early on put themselves out there in such a way, right, to be as honest as possible for many, many years about what they know, what they think, and for the consequences for those actions, the blowback, if you will, the archonic interference, to come years later after what's been done has been done and archived in the Borg, even if they deleted their content. So we see now in a day and age of coronavirus getting worse, where we're already concerned about viruses, people are concerned about getting sick, but now it's also about all that lingering darkness, slander, as people sit at home and they stare at the screen, not realizing, even if they think that it's contrived, even if they think that they are being treated like a dog being programmed, they will only look at it from a particular lens or blame a certain people instead of see the real ways they're being programmed. It'll be like some cartoon version of the conspiracy where there's a few people that you can easily blame, or people on the news. Now there are people that are angry with anyone that is suggesting personal protective equipment, PPE, or wearing masks. They are unaware that the programming online is designed to cause them to be angry with people that are presenting information or ideas with them, to where the virus isn't a threat. People talking about protecting yourself from the virus are the threat. There would be other examples that would really stand out with regards to white women's supremacy, warning one woman in a bar about things that I believe would come to pass. The year was 2011. It was on the West Coast, talking about the future of China and Russia and the threat to women's safety in the event of an invasion and the need to protect, and the anger, the demonic anger that erupted from her, saying, we don't need your protection, we need protection from you. And saying it loud, so loud to the point that people are looking at me as if I said a really inappropriate comment regarding some sort of sexual favor. A sense of hate, all of a sudden, from these android apes were directed at me because a human was beginning to scream at me. And this would be a pattern that would be seen for many, many years, including the sad reality of realizing that no Western women, despite all the feminism, despite all the Me Too movements, no Western women, especially today, are protesting the violent gang rapes of Middle Eastern women interrogated by an occupying army. And so we see what, for example, if we go back to World War II, we see what happened to German women after the fall of Nazi Germany at the hands of Soviet troops. And so despite what we hear from the so-called anti-racists and feminists about social justice, we ask ourselves, then why don't you speak about this group, or why don't you talk about what your society does to those women? They'll talk to a certain level about this society when it's in the box of something that leads to riots and civil unrest and broken windows, and a mob of people against a few police officers that are not actually setting policy. That's what we have right now. And they will not realize that their violent actions in the streets are designed to bring about that unsafe reality where women are sold like commodities again. And the world's oldest profession, human trafficking. That type of slavery comes back. The circumstances exist now for those circumstances to come back. With society remaining silent about people that are slandered and bullied into silence and hiding that for years tried to warn them. That's where we are now. Where it's less than 1%. It's like 0.1%. of, say, an audience that will even have a level of awareness as to what's going on. When it comes to hive mind mass consciousness, we see many examples of this, regardless of topic. One person convicted of murder gives his exit statements as he's sentenced, and he's got a really bad haircut. And then one person arrives in the comments to note that all the comments were basically about the haircut and not the content. He's like 99.9% of the comments here are about the haircut. Not 99%, 99.9% of the comments were all jokes about the haircut. Wow, the guy must have gotten to fight with his barber. And only 0.1% would be commenting on something other than the haircut. And he's like, there's me. When you see that level of uniformity, that's not a good sign. So I would say that there are cycles of time in which we're going to see that extreme gross indifference. Another example regarding white women's supremacy. The year is 2015, and I'm joining forces with off-gridders. And we're having a discussion about bringing awareness to the community about the draconian land use codes that are going to result in people becoming homeless. And these people that were very proud, prideful Bernie supporters were not free of the illusions of separation, her and her wounded military husband, who spent time assisting people as they murdered innocent victims of war under the guise of fighting terrorists in Afghanistan. When I disclosed the pain that I've been through in my life over being mixed, being without family, and being judged because of it, instead of having empathy or having peaceful values, like many people would like to describe themselves as having, progressive values, anti-war values, equality-based values. Her main concern was, her first question was, so what's your view of women? In a really nervous tone, as if perhaps I was from another culture or brainwashed to beat or rape women. At that time in 2015, leading into 2016, this is a very important part of history that today's humans have no knowledge of, nor compassion when they are informed of this historical fact. During that period, social media, YouTube and Facebook, was flooded with disinformation about Syrian immigrants and other Middle Eastern immigrants, where people fleeing dangerous zones were painted as terrorists who were actually, in their minds, sleeper agents. And so certain outlets would publish a great deal of disinformation. And while there is crime and there is sexual assault and there are gangs involving immigrants, as well as people that aren't immigrants, but gangs are a reality when people are in poverty. It was taken to such an extent, it was exaggerated to such an extent, that in their minds painted a certain picture to where years before that they may have been open talking to different people that were genetically different. And it wasn't automatically assumed, for their own safety of course, that those people are from another culture, another language, another religion. And so they missed the whole point regarding this. That this isn't necessarily about defending anyone from a certain country or religion, but more so talking about that type of propaganda leads people into this automatic android ape judgment of people that look different, that may be identified to be of a certain genetic makeup. And so for their own safety, they would begin to become silent about those things. And in many cases, peer pressure. Right? There was a time in which it would be okay to say, stop the wars, in the war, stop killing those people. And then years later, that became very, very unpopular. And yet they would be unable to see themselves for what they've become. In this fallen, backwards world, we see the real reason why nature worship does not lead us to God. Many times, we see followers, in some cases, of Adolf Hitler or dark occultic belief systems praising nature, worshiping nature or what they understand to be nature as opposed to unnatural. Because there's something about nature and different places on this planet that seems to cause a certain level of regression with regards to consciousness. Having lived in pure nature for multiple years, not only did I see much more darkness in that particular sect of individuals that lived in that area, I began to see how my own existence there weakened me to a certain level. By being isolated in nature, somehow people were more easily able to fuck with me, get inside my head, direct dark energy at me, or to remote view me in some way. And then I began to understand that there may be regional entities that are emitting from certain mountains that may not like certain humans that reside in certain areas, that may actually conspire against those humans or make it easier for other humans that hate that human to get to them, to get inside their head, to get inside their space. So there could be, see, this is the dark side of speaking controversial things or speaking one's truth while in isolation and filming where one is. Even if they don't know the actual GPS coordinates of where one is, entities in technology may. And thus be able to manifest in some way etherically. In addition to those humans with maybe a certain level of power, of consciousness, even psychic power in some cases, doesn't make them good, doesn't make them holy, or followers of the true creator, but powerful enough in the mind to create some sort of interference, to create some sort of fear. I would feel certain people walking up the road, and I became convinced that they were coming for me at some point in time, planning to stalk me, planning to expose me, planning to film me, planning to show the world what miserable off-grid conditions I was living in without conventional running water or a toilet. Living like an animal, as they say, just like those people. It was their wet dream. And then when I moved and I got away from that place, that evil mountain, in which many people seem to have a fond connection with a particular deity in Norse mythology, who often demanded human sacrifice. A god of war. One that will not be named and mentioned. For that mistake has already been made. Just like taking a lesson from the movie Beetlejuice. Certain entities or deities are not to be summoned, called out to, threatened, or slandered. So I became aware that the mistakes that I did make regarding saying certain things about it, as well as them, or the followers of him, created some very, very bad luck. Another time for that. But the lesson has been learned. And so going back to subject B, who falsely has presented herself to be a love and light guru, talked about raising one's frequency and the top tips to do that in a video. Of course, a video she produced several years before, trolling me and basically insulting my genetic makeup. She's talking about the love of nature. The love of nature. And at that time and in recent years, right, I saw nature as my escape from the city. Get away from the city, get away from technology, get away from cell phones, and just get deep in nature. And in a world that's populated, right, it wouldn't really dawn on me on a deep level why certain places in such a populated world would actually be very unpopulated. Where a guy like me who had a very difficult time fitting in anywhere would find only a certain place to go. Instead of having that light bulb go off above my head going, well, you know, there's a reason why there's nobody up there. Yeah, there's a reason. You even got a chance to get up there. And while I was physically safe, because that was meant to be, and I ended up in my own rent-to-own situation, i.e. making payments on something or a plot of land that I would later own. Oh, it came with a deeper cost other than monetarily. It came with a certain level of vampirism. It came with also my own senses being dulled. And through my marijuana addiction and my compulsive nature and my OCD, so my own darker character defects came out and shined most exceedingly. And I wasn't even self-aware of my own mistakes. The risks involved in making certain comments or sharing little bits of information, it was as if I was duped by my own ego and vanity, as well as fear, anger, lust, and all the rest. I went up there for a sense of healing, to cut the cords from society. And while I got a great distance away from society, I was being played like a tool. I was being played like a fiddle as I lived in isolation without friends for many, many years, without company, without companionship, and not just there, but in that region of chaos. To quote a phrase from the Pisces Sophia, of which I'm currently reading. It wasn't until I left that place that I began to heal from certain things. I may have began a process of healing from certain things while there, but it wasn't complete. Not while still lost in my addiction and my fears, not with a sense of a bullseye on my back. In a world in which, in a matter of a few years, by simply speaking my truth, I would feel that I put my life at risk. As the period of moving up there to leaving there was a very dark period for the United States. I would say that it's a miracle, an act of the true Creator, that I was safe for as long as I was. And there was a time that did come in which someone put out my address, and that unwanted people began to come to the residency that were not what they appeared to be or claimed to be. They were foes more than friends. I came to see how even connecting with certain people on social media in a desire to get a bag of weed put me on the radar for those individuals that never forgot about me. And so as we complete today's 1 hour recording, there's so much more to say, but we're going to do this in stages. So we keep this momentum going every day. Okay, we'll get deeper into the illusions of separation and why in the hive mind white women's supremacy exists and how there's a power that women have to take this world back from the Dark Lord. How women have the power to change this world almost overnight, just like search engine optimization, how certain search terms and words, may cause certain things to appear differently. Doesn't mean that the overlords and the programmers won't then shift things up or cause natural disasters. But the point is, we're not powerless. Women have way more power than anything they've ever been told by either their parents or these institutions or any of the top feminists. And the very fact that they're not taught about their own power should be a wake-up call to the true nature of human consciousness, how little has changed between our world and past periods in which women have been sold. Women have been commodities. Because we live in the day and age in which women will sell women, or work with men, or serve men, or sleep with men that oppress other women. There was a protest in the United States recently regarding a woman that has been raped and killed by her military commanders. And while people are shocked and outraged that a Hispanic woman was killed by those men, there is very little awareness as to the ignorance that a female person of color would be joining the biggest white supremacy gang on the planet, the United States military, in which people are sold overseas, kidnapped, raped in some cases, in front of their family, or to extract a false confession. These things have become normalized and then quickly brushed under the rug, and the media mostly silent and complicit in recent years. Where certain things may have been reported on in the past, now they're not. It requires a dumbed-down collective consciousness, modern-day protesters, to omit that critical detail. That it's bad luck to join certain institutions that professionally disappear and murder people. And so as long as they choose to remain ignorant as to what some of these institutions are doing to other people, they will continue to be victimized and harmed by that very system as they go, oh my God, we had no idea. They still have no idea. It's not an isolated incident. If you're going to lay down with the beast, why then expect to cuddle and then be surprised when the beast bites? People have more common sense around certain kinds of dogs or certain things of that nature because they're aware of what that dog is capable of. Just like, keeping a certain dog away from a cat, as nice as that dog may be to that human, it may be in that dog's programming to tear into that cat. And so because they care about that cat, or they care about that rabbit, or they care about that bird. Notice the word I keep saying 3 times is I care, they care, people care. People care more right now in this Android ape world of hierarchy about animal safety, animal cruelty, rather than certain people being bombed off the face of the world because of what they've been told about them. And it's in the subconscious. And so there could be 5 years, 10 years, 20 years after the event that led to these wars, an event that's not what it appears to be. And people in poverty, who they themselves claim that they are against injustice, will still join those organized violent institutions and gangs, militaries. As if they have no empathy for those individuals. But it's really a combination of no information, programming, and a lack of empathy. And years, in some cases, of ancestral programming. In a world in which very few things of a certain type appear to change, right? The technology changes, the movies change. But if we look at the course of time, we see ongoing persecution of certain types of people on the world for hundreds to thousands of years with no real end in sight, only breaks. And so there's a deeper reason why certain people are pushed out of sight. Never spoken of by, the world's leading anti-racists or patriots who claim on the other side to believe in law and order, saying hashtag all lives matter, but in no way whatsoever actually believing that on paper, only saying that as a retort to Black Lives Matter. While both groups are silent about the same individuals wiped off the face of the earth forever. A moment of prayer before we close out this recording for those victims of war and victims in general, whether it be of war or something else, in which no one speaks for them. Here now, in this moment, they are to be remembered. The desecration of human life is unacceptable. And these words of truth will be spoken into the future. When people realize that what was done was wrong, it doesn't mean that they have to change the world. It means that they can energetically step back from the hive mind consciousness that somehow told them that it was okay, that they didn't need to be aware of it, or somehow influenced them to be unaware of it. A true awakening, a true shift in consciousness of a higher order would recognize that which needs to change in order for us to evolve beyond this kind of a soul prison. This completes part 3 for July 15th, 2020.